Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is March 21st, 2017. I don't know if yesterday was the first day of spring. I think it was yesterday. But here I am in beautiful New Jersey. I'm actually home for a little while, which is very nice, preparing for the new album launch, March 31st. We're finishing up the crowdfunding campaign. We're doing some Tatiana coin sales and some album pre-sales and stuff like that. So I thought I don't have to go anywhere. My next talk, though, is going to be a performance at Harvard for the CanaMed conference, which should be interesting. Anyway, people can catch up and find out about all that stuff on my website, tatianamrose.com. But today we're going to have some guests. We're not just going to hear about what's happening with me. We're not going to hear from Josh because he is on a delayed train back from some German city to another. So unfortunately, he's missing us and he's kind of bummed out. But we have some great guests for us today. And our first guest is Caitlin Long, who is the chairman and president at Symbiont.io. You guys might know about Symbiont because they are sort of the brainchild of the same people who made Counterparty, which is what Tatiana Coin is. Tatiana Coin is a counterparty token. So I'm excited to have Caitlin here with us today. Hey, Caitlin, nice to meet you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Tatiana, thanks for having me on, and a fellow Liberty.me friend.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that you were on there. We broadcast on Liberty.me, Let's Talk Bitcoin, LRN.fm, and IPM Nation. So we're always expanding, but the home base is Liberty.me.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's great. We have, I'm sure we have a million friends in common.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, we're certainly posting a lot on there. So tell me a little bit about your background. You know, we were getting to know each other before we started taping the show. And give me a little bit of kind of where you started and how you ended up where you are right now.
Sure. I spent 22 years on Wall Street working in one of the big banks. And in 2008, I had my conversion to Austrian School Economics when the financial crisis hit. And I was definitely sure that the mainstream explanation for it was not accurate and it didn't make any sense. Specifically, I heard an interview with Tim Geithner saying interest rates were too low and that's what caused the financial crisis. And then 1 or 2 days later, he gave another interview saying interest rates needed to be lower still. And that was the contradiction that sent me down that rabbit hole. And I keep going further down. But was an early supporter of the Mises Institute and Jeffrey Tucker, Fee, Liberty.me, been around all those groups for, gosh, almost 10 years now. And came across Bitcoin in 2012. And at the time I was working at Morgan Stanley. I stayed working inside Morgan Stanley. And actually, you know, they were great. They spent a lot of time giving me a platform to explain how the economy really worked. And so I shared with a lot of people the alternative views of how the economy really works. And it was so refreshing. A lot of clients reacted very, very favorably to it. So I kept going. And then I discovered Bitcoin. And at first I didn't think there was any job, but I met a company called Ripple, which is another one of the early Bitcoin 2.0 companies, in January 2014. And I remember putting my pen down about 5 minutes into the meeting and saying, oh my God, this is going to tip. And everybody looked at me and like, what are you talking about? Because none of the Morgan Stanley people who were with me in the meeting were familiar with Bitcoin at all. Or if they were, it was all surrounding it and not any of the good. And at that point, I figured out, gosh, this technology is really going to change the mainstream financial services industry. And I started running with that and jumped over to Symbiont in August of 2016.
Okay, so I love this story because, you know, as somebody who came from the music world and just somebody who has basically no understanding of the financial world, I mean, you know, I understand now a little bit more than I did before, but sure, it's very easy to vilify that industry, right? But I love I love what you said, that people were really responsive to it, that even though you were immersed in this system that, you know, obviously employed you, you were able to see some of the shortcomings and to be, I guess, you know, a pioneer in your own field, kind of driving innovation and kind of a different way of thinking about money. So people really liked it. And did you face any resistance along the way? I mean, did anybody, you know, what happened that was maybe challenging with that?
And I was always careful to focus on the substance rather than the politics of it, because I quickly found out that, if you start putting labels on it as opposed to focusing on the substance, that all of a sudden people, put you in some sort of a camp. And that was great. And it's funny, there are a lot of folks who are similarly minded out there in the corporate world who, who recognized it early on, and then I developed pretty deep relationships with a couple of them, because they always wanted to chat, because what they were getting from the mainstream was not something that they agreed with. It wasn't an explanation that made sense to them, so they always wanted to check in. And then when Bitcoin came along, I was worried, just like everybody else was, to put my head up. I was we called ourselves the Three Musketeers at Morgan Stanley. And in fact, Jake Dienelt was one of them. A lot of your listeners probably knew Jake. He passed away suddenly a couple of weeks ago, and there's a memorial service for him coming up on March 29th. But he was a dear friend, and he's one of the people who helped me understand it early on. And all three of us ended up going on to work in the field. But at the beginning, we were all afraid to talk about it publicly. And then the ball got rolling, and it became something where actually the chief technology officer of Morgan Stanley looped me into a group of people to start talking about it and vetting all of the opportunities that were coming Morgan Stanley's way. So it's just funny how it all worked out and how one thing led to another. I'm working in a platform that is not Bitcoin based, but we are very much, as a company, philosophically aligned with the ethos of the industry, and the technology that we have is decentralized, and so we do stand apart from the group of permissioned blockchain, so-called permissioned blockchain platforms that are being created.
So for people who are not familiar with Symbiont, can you give me an overview of exactly what it is and how it works?
Sure. We are a smart contracts company. We actually predate Ethereum, in the sense that that our platform, our smart contracts started before Ethereum was released, and we're a distributed ledger that has smart contracts business logic capabilities with the platform. As you alluded to, the co-founders, two of the co-founders were original co-founders of the Counterparty Protocol as well. That was, of course, a Bitcoin 2.0 project. It was UTXO based, for those of you who are familiar with the technology. Symbiont is not UTXO based. We are a replicated state machine based, so it's a different architecture. And really, that's because we decided to build a platform that the institutional financial services community could use right away. And they can't, for example, deploy on Bitcoin at 7 transactions a second, for example. I don't want to get into the whole scaling debate, but early on, it was pretty clear the compliance folks at all the big financial institutions were not going to be able to get comfortable with Bitcoin. And by the way, I think the Bitcoin community probably, in the end, should be grateful for that. It's there are sort of the permissioned versions of the software that the mainstream financial services industry is looking to deploy, and they've gotten comfortable with that. But we are a nice hybrid in the sense that we are a truly decentralized platform, but we are permissioned, so the mainstream financial institutions can get comfortable with us, and yet our architecture is decentralized. There are no central actors in our platform. We do not have a validation role on any of the transactions that go into the network. We cannot see anybody's private data. We literally, as a software company, just update the network software, and essentially the on-ramp and off-ramp are handled by us, but that's it. Everything else is handled by the peers and those peers will happen to be financial institutions.
So what is your role as chairman and president? Because, I don't know what your technical background is, but you have a nice way of explaining this and, something that normal people could understand. Are you going around and pitching this to financial institutions, and what is their reaction, and can they even make these adjustments? Because there are these big blobs, right? And blobs don't move so quickly because they've got to, move their blob around. So,
yeah.
How do they onboard this stuff and remain competitive? Because, there are some opportunities for their control over the market to be challenged, I guess. So how are they looking at this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer is there are so many there are so many redundancies in the financial services industry of cost and infrastructure that it's pretty obvious that this technology can help to address. And so there are real reasons why financial institutions are embracing the technology. And I think it's fascinating how the financial industry has embraced it so quickly and so deeply, that pretty much everybody now has blockchain experiments going on. Some of them are in the Bitcoin and Ethereum public networks, but again, because the lawyers won't let financial institutions work on networks like that where the counterparties are not known, it's tough in a regulated financial institution for those projects to be done in the public networks. But we are actually, it's publicly disclosed, we won the competition to provide a platform for the syndicated loans market. That's a market, believe it or not, that's really not digitized. There are 25 million faxes a year that are sent between the participants in that market still. And so there was, the stars were aligning for all the participants in the market to agree that they needed a big tech upgrade. And we happened to be the one who won the competition for that. And there are financial institutions led by Credit Suisse, and it's a who's who of the big banks who are deploying the technology. So if you had told me 3 years ago that be leading the deployments of this technology, I would have said no way. But again, it wasn't until, well, I guess more than 3 years ago. It was January 2014 when it sort of clicked. And then I heard Patrick Byrne's speech to the Bitcoin conference in May 2014 in Amsterdam, and that just put a lot more of the puzzle pieces together. And I started investing in these companies pretty early on as well, and you know, just ran with it. It was a nice confluence of my philosophical views with my experience, and there are not a lot of people who have backgrounds in both and can help bridge the gap, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Cool. So are there any projects in the space right now that are exciting? I mean, they don't necessarily have to be financially related. What have you seen over the past few years that you're kind of excited about? And then what are some of your reservations with the community? Do you think that we have some problems facing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? You know, how would you identify those?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most exciting projects is something I think we can all get behind, which is one that we're working on at Symbiont, which is the Delaware Blockchain Initiative. And the interesting thing about that is the financial services industry figured out how to set up the infrastructure, not necessarily for nefarious reasons. It more had to do with the lack of technology that didn't, you know, really exist to handle the processing, the processing needs of the financial services industry. And so they created these centralized institutions. And those centralized institutions are very powerful, and the workflows, one of my colleagues actually said this once, and I think he's right, that the financial industry, until you actually really change the workflows, all digitize the old workflows when the internet came along. And blockchain technology will actually give the financial industry the true benefits of digitization for the first time ever, because we'll actually update the workflows and you know, take these workflows that were put in place 30 or 40 years ago before the technology existed to process these huge volumes of transactions efficiently, and now we'll actually do them on much more efficient platforms. And so the Delaware Blockchain Initiative is important because this gives property rights back to the owners of securities. Right now, when you register a company, you're doing it in a piece of paper. And if the company issues shares publicly, they give a different piece of paper, but one piece of paper to the Central Securities Depository. In the US, that happens to be the DTCC. In Europe, it's Euroclear or Clearstream, for example. But there's one piece of paper, and that is, the DTCC is the record owner of all of the securities, because they own that one piece of paper which represents all of the securities. And what you and I own is derivatives of that piece of paper. It's an IOU off that piece of paper, which means that if our broker-dealer goes bust, we ended up with an IOU. It's very similar to the way fractional reserve banking works in the financial services, in the traditional banking industry. When we put money into a bank, we're really lending it to them. It's not really ours anymore. And that's exactly the same way the securities industry works. And so the Delaware Blockchain Initiative, among other benefits, will actually allow companies to again, be the true owners of what they think they already own, which is the securities in the shares in the companies that they buy.
So that's a really interesting insight. Do you think that, and I don't know if this is something that you guys are thinking of, because it seems like you're tackling the financial services industry. Do you think that government services, like where do you see government services on the blockchain developing? Obviously, that's an even more slow kind of blob that would be able to implement that kind of thing. But have you guys thought about using your technology on that front at all, or what does that look like?
We have, and Delaware's an interesting state because it's a very pro-business state, and they provide registries, which I think even the anarcho-capitalists would agree that one of the roles for the state is property recording and resolution of disputes around property ownership. And so having an immutable record of property ownership is something of value, and this is what the state of Delaware is setting up. So they do intend to do this for more than just corporate registries, but also for land titles. They're going to do it. They've publicly talked about for some things probably that the anarcho-capitalist community wouldn't be as supportive of, like professional licenses and driver's licenses and the like. But basically, your question is, yeah, your question is spot on. That's essentially it's a way to deliver those services more efficiently, and Delaware is on the record that they're looking at that, and Illinois just last week came out and made a speech that they're looking at deploying this technology to transform government services. So I've said publicly that I think within 20 years financial services will just be software. I haven't said publicly, but I believe this, that a lot of government services will just be software in 20 years as well.
That's very interesting. What do you think of the New York angle, right? Because I remember going to see an explanation of BitLicense and thinking, dear God, I feel so bad for these people that have to try and figure this out, because even though there was this lawyer explaining it to everybody, basically every single question people asked him, he had no response for. He says, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. So how have you found the regulatory environment in New York? And do you think that that's going to drive is New York going to remain a financial center, or are we sort of shooting ourselves in the foot and driving that innovation to other places?
Well, yeah, the BitLicense is problematic. As a company, we haven't had to use it because we're not using cryptocurrency in our main business. So, but I do think that has posed a problem for, right? I think, it's an interesting debate. I'm at bottom a Bitcoin maximalist. I have said that publicly before. So you may be wondering, how am I comfortable with how do I jive the fact that I'm working for a blockchain company that's not a Bitcoin-based company? And the answer is, I think it's just a question of time. When I said earlier that I think financial services will be just software, I do think that denationalized money is ultimately going to become money as more and more people use it. But it's tough to get the mainstream existing financial services infrastructure to switch over to it. And honestly, you're fully aware of this. Bitcoin is more an emerging market story right now than it is a developed market story. And I think that's just great. I think the fact that a lot of people are getting their first bank account and it happens to be on their phone and it happens to be with Bitcoin in the world, that's amazing. And the development of that happening in parallel outside of the traditional financial industry is fantastic. And I think the longer that it can stay developing in that part of the world where it just gets more and more and more penetration, right? Everything's up and to the right. Generally speaking, the trends in Bitcoin: hash power, wallets, transactions, price, of course, volumes. And I think that's going to continue, and that's fantastic. And over time, I don't know that in 20 years, Bitcoin itself will be what we use. We may call it Bitcoin, and it may not look anything like it does today because 20 years is a long time. But I think that financial services will become software, and eventually, I think government will as well. And the mainstream financial industry. Andreas Antonopoulos makes a good analogy about the walled gardens of the intranet. one may argue blockchain is the intranet, the walled gardens that the mainstream companies are using first, but they have to, in part because regulators are pushing them in that direction. And that's okay, because there's a lot that can be done, like, for example, with the Delaware Blockchain Initiative and clarifying who really owns securities. There's a lot of good that can be done with these interim step platforms that drive us to a convergence 20 years from now, where I think my Bitcoin maximalism won't be viewed as so contradictory with what I'm actually doing in my day job.
I love this interview. It's so fun. Okay, so how are you guys getting the word out about Symbiont? Like, are you going to, I mean, I do a lot of Bitcoin conferences. I haven't seen much of a presence there. What's the approach? You know, how are you guys going to get this out there besides sort of personal relationships? Are there kind of conferences that you're targeting? Are you speaking anywhere, or is anybody on the team speaking anywhere?
Yes, we do. I do a lot of conferences. I've tended to do a lot of institutional investor conferences because that's who we're targeting right now. So like the Structured Finance Industry Group Conference or the Property Recorders Industry Association Conference. It's not the types of conferences where we would naturally run into Bitcoin folks. But you know, it's interesting because I think there's definitely been a fork, pun intended, between, you know, the traditional Bitcoin community and then the blockchain community that's not Bitcoin or Ethereum based. And within that community, that's probably where our main competitors are. But within that community, we're really the only one that has a decentralized platform. Everybody else has centralized actors in the platform that either, like I said earlier, have to sign the transactions or they get to see everybody's private data. So you have to trust the third party in those platforms. And I just don't think that ultimately that they will win out. I think the decentralization will win out, and you've got to check the boxes for anti-money laundering and know your customer. Again, the regulated financial industry has to do that. So it is what it is. And that's the difficulty they have with actually using Bitcoin or Ethereum themselves right now. But once you get over that hump, you really want a decentralized system. And our platform is pretty unique in that regard because we are truly decentralized.
Okay, I like it. This is all good stuff. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we bring Mark on and send you off on your very busy day? I'm sure there's a lot still to do.
Oh yeah.
Work is never done in startup world.
Yeah, no, I just have to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Jeffrey Tucker, who founded Liberty.me and brought us together here on this platform. And his Bit by Bit book, if anyone hasn't read it, was a terrific book. It helped me really learn about Bitcoin. I think that came out around, if I'm remembering right, it was January 2015. So it was pretty early. It was a couple years ago now. And I'll be speaking at FeeCon. So if anybody comes to FeeCon in Atlanta,
when is that?
Look me up. It's like the third weekend in June, I believe.
I'm gonna have to look into that.
Definitely should. They're going to do their traditional Fee University, and then there's one day, that Saturday, where Patrick Byrne, who I mentioned earlier, is also going to be speaking, and then Jeffrey's going to be interviewing me at FeeCon. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that's great. I credit Jeffrey actually for getting me interested in Bitcoin. Tony Glippi and Stephen Pear sold me my first Bitcoin, supported me first, but really listening to Jeffrey talk about it, I think is a really good bridge for people who maybe are not as technically inclined, because he makes you think about the implications of cryptocurrency on society. So that sounds great. I'm gonna have to look into going to that event, and I'll ping you later. Maybe we could grab a coffee in New York. Another fellow,
most definitely,
fellow New York area
and if you,
person.
Yeah, if you are there, we should record something for your show while you're there, and you can grab Patrick too. I'm sure he'd love to come on as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Caitlin, what's the website and any kind of way for people to reach you?
Yeah, www.symbiont.io, and I've also got a blog, www.caitlin-long.com. I'm very active posting on LinkedIn and also on Twitter.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate you coming on. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tatiana.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Cool, guys. So I really liked that. I didn't expect to like that interview as much as I did. Not that that sounds like I'm being mean. I don't mean it that way. But sometimes when I think of finance stuff, it's dry, but it's always inspiring to speak to people who are, looking to disrupt the system and are really positive about it. And I think that's what we got with Caitlin. So I'm appreciative of her coming here. Right before we bring on Mark, who's our next guest, I just wanted to say thank you to a couple of our sponsors. Kirk at thebitcoincpa.com has been detangling my messy mane of Bitcoin transactions for a while now. Thank God, because it can get a little messy. I'm not going to lie. If you need any help with your taxes, Bitcoin CPA has all sorts of different kinds of things. He also wrote a book. Crypto Compare is one of our sponsors where they have all different kinds of information. Compare your cryptocurrencies at cryptocompare.com. Third Key Solutions, just a shout out to Pamela Morgan. One of my absolute favorite Bitcoin speakers, working on all sorts of blockchain legal uses that are actually helpful. And yeah, Third Key Solutions will help your business be more secure. Our friends at Sovereign Tech and Sex and Science Hour, just want to give them a shout out. Awesome podcasts. Vaultoro.com. Of course, Josh isn't here today, and Vaultoro is not our sponsor, but I like Vaultoro, and I think that they're really cool. Also, hello to my friends over at NetKey. Check it out. Dawn is the woman. She just had a really great article written about her in like LA entrepreneur stuff. And she talks about how she's sometimes mentors people. I feel like Dawn does that for me. And I'm just very grateful to have her friendship and intelligent insight. And their company's been doing great. So without further ado, that was a very long thank you to my sponsors, but they deserve my love. I wanted to welcome Mark Dukas. Mark, what's going on? How's it going?
It's going great. Just hanging out here in sunny Charlotte. We got our first good weather of the winter, so looks like spring's coming.
I hope so. New York has actually been pretty nice. Maybe I'll go for a little walk after this, actually. Now I'm looking outside. It looks pretty sunny here. So what is your site? Bitcoin Smart Money, is that right? Why did you call it that?
Right. So I called it Bitcoin Smart Money because I've always tried to be smart with my money. And then when I got into Bitcoin, I realized that this can be a full-time job. This could be a career. This is not just currency. I realized.
Wait, what were you doing before that?
So before that, I worked in sales. So I've always been into sales. I worked in outside sales, so it gave me some freedom really to give me a stepping stone into Bitcoin. When I was a kid, I was that guy in high school that sold the CDRs to people. I was in the classified ads before the internet came around, selling computers, guitars, anything I could really flip and try to make some arbitrage on. So I had, sales in my blood. It's kind of how I was brought up. And in the 2000s, I got way into tech with Xboxes, hacking them, iPhones, jailbreaking them, all that.
I thought you meant just playing them. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that counts.
No, just because when you could mod them, you could increase their value. So I'm all about value propositions. And I was able to create that with Xboxes and iPhones. And then into the early, say 2010s, I started learning about discounted gift cards and how you can, buy them to save money on things for your family, whether it's groceries, whether it's clothing, for back to school. And I found sites that were able to utilize that process using Bitcoin. And then I was like, what is Bitcoin? So I read their white paper, really went right over my head the first time, from understanding it to how amazing this system of payment is. I understood the value of it, but the complexity of it was really too much for me to handle at first, just like most people. So it's kind of turned off almost. But then one day I just something clicked and I was like, there's a lot of value here. And I saw that you could create and use it in ways that could, go further than the dollar. So when I use my dollar, it's worth less over time. So I'm trying to figure out outlets now using other currencies to increase value. So you can do that with Bitcoin through tons of different arbitrage methods because the markets are inefficient right now. It's so early. And that's kind of what Bitcoin Smart Money is. I do it on the side, so I haven't had too much time to really develop it. And my HTML web development skills that's not where my specialty lies. So I'm doing it on the side, but I do provide technical analysis insight on the price, just to remove a lot of the emotions that could happen with Bitcoin just because of the volatility of the asset. So on the site, I give people some resources to use Bitcoin and save money. I link to purse.io. had a lot of great success there and have had people save, hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars in a year. So the site has just a lot of ways to use Bitcoin, and then I give you an analysis on what's going on with the trend and a few news stories.
Great. So when I was talking to one of my best friends the other day, her boyfriend is a trader. And now all of a sudden he wants to learn about Bitcoin. And I've always said to her, Bitcoin trading can be very lucrative. What are some reasons, I feel like this is sort of a story that you find a lot, right? People who are in the financial industry, they want to trade, they hear about Bitcoin. What's the advice that you give to people who are from that kind of a background that are not necessarily ideologically driven, or they're not necessarily getting inspired to create new business paradigms, like what Caitlin and Symbiont guys are doing or whatever. What about somebody who just wants to make money and wants to learn about Bitcoin? What's that process like, and what can people expect to learn at your site about that as well?
Well, definitely. That process is a little different, and that's what I run into more often than not. Guys in the financial industry, CFAs, CPAs, they're looking at how can I use Bitcoin to make money. They don't really care about anything about it. So for me, I'm passionate about it, and when I run into those type of people, I sometimes say, do they have the level of work ethic it's going to take to understand how Bitcoin works? Because it's not a get rich quick scheme. It just isn't. The early people that got involved, they've done well because their cost averages are so low that they've made over 1,000 times their money. So to get rich quick, it's not what people think it is, and that should detract a lot of the noobs. But from a trading standpoint, there's a ton of value just due to the way that it fluctuates. Now, it fluctuates, obviously. We had some downtrends in 14 and 15. But what you should have been doing during the downtrends is acquiring Bitcoin. So if you had done that and been smart about acquiring Bitcoin because you believed in the technology, you believed in the layers that it's creating, the infrastructure is being built through the mining, the miners in China and the miners worldwide, then you would see, that appreciation. We're up over a couple 100%, in a little over 18 months.
Wow. Okay, cool. So how long do they need to study for? I mean, it seems, what's a long time?
I guess what I'm trying to say is you want to understand Bitcoin. It's not just like buying Apple stock. Okay. When you buy Apple, you're buying that company and anything. When you're buying Bitcoin, you're investing, if you're looking to hold it long-term, I guess, you're investing in the infrastructure that's being built. You're investing in the man hours that's being built. So you're not just, to me, it's the greatest investment opportunity in my life. I feel like I was born at the right time. I was introduced to it at the right time. It's kind of like the outlier effect. And I just feel like for me, that's Bitcoin. And that's why I decided to dedicate my career to it and try to help others and be exposed to it. Because, the 1 billion people, all of us right now that we're talking, we have access to all the banking that we need. It's great. It's great for the uses that we can, make money on it. But when the people that get involved, the other 4.5, 5 billion people, that's when we're going to see everything take off. And it reminds me of Amara's law that tells you, people totally, underestimate what can happen in technology in 10 years, but they overestimate what can happen in 2 years. And Bitcoin is going to be that staple. We're going to look back in 10 and just say, wow. And I think the ROI returns are just going to be immense over the next 4 or 5 years going into the next halving in 2019, 2020.
Are you Bitcoin only? Do you mess around with all the other altcoins and stuff?
I'm really a Bitcoin only holder, long-term holder. I've messed around with Ethereum and Monero a little bit. I've did some Ethereum trading early on when it IPO'd, and then it traded below $1 for a long time. So I was able to take advantage of some of the growth in Ethereum, but I decided to focus on what I do best and just double down on Bitcoin because that's what I believe in, that's what I know, and that's what I trade. So instead of really trying to spread myself too thin, just said focus on one thing and do it well.
So you're down in Charlotte, is that right?
Yeah, my family just relocated to Charlotte from the Boston, Massachusetts area originally. Family moved out to Austin, Texas. We lived in West Palm Beach, down in the Miami area, some Bitcoiners down there. And then we came up to Charlotte, it's a big financial hub. And just really had an amazing experience there over the past year, meeting a ton of people in the industry.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. So is there, you know, New York is a very cosmopolitan city, so the open-mindedness to cryptocurrency, I think, is slightly more natural, just because it's, you know, a big center of idea exchange in general. How do you feel that your community has understood Bitcoin, and like, is the financial industry down there resistant? Where have you seen some progress?
Yeah, now I've seen the financial industry, they were resistant when I first got here in 2015, but I can honestly say that they've opened up. I've been contacted by a few firms in the Charlotte area just to educate them on Bitcoin and blockchains. But it's kind of funny how they try to shy away from that Bitcoin term, and they're like, can you educate us on blockchain? What is blockchain? You know, and I'm just trying to like, well, you know, the only really working successful blockchain is Bitcoin. So let's get into Bitcoin and how that blockchain works. And you know, they start to grasp onto it. But I think the ETF that happened recently, you know, it dashed a few people's hopes. But I think long term, we were not ready for an ETF, and it's much better that we didn't get one.
Well, you know, one of the things about the ETF, I was speaking with somebody who works in the financial markets, and what he was saying was the ETF would actually be very bad because it would start creating this, and again, this is not my wheelhouse, but sort of an artificial market, sort of how, you know, they control the price of gold because they've got these kind of little paper representations. What would you say to that?
Definitely. So when you think about Wall Street and market manipulation, high frequency trading, with Bitcoin only having a $20 billion market cap, and if you were to run it through a derivatives market or just allow it to be manipulated in that form, it could have really done a lot of damage, because the system is not yet in place ready for that type of growth or that type of experimentation or that type of speculation. Right now, it's extremely speculative. So to put it in another humongous speculative market, which would have, you know, probably had upwards to $400-500 million influxed into it, you know, I think that it was good that we waited, and you didn't push it too fast.
Okay, cool. So what is on your agenda to sort of evangelize some more? Are you coming to any kind of conferences? Are you organizing any events down by you? Are you thinking of coming up to Consensus maybe?
Yeah, I'll be at Consensus in May, so I'm going to be able to see a bunch of people and just, you know, network and share some ideas. I'll be in Dubai in October. I'll put more about that on my website, and just a few other things. Just I post on LinkedIn regularly, so you can check me out at LinkedIn. You can find that from bitcoinsmartmoney.com, and just, you know, whenever. I'm available on Twitter as well.
Awesome. All right. Do you have any final parting words? What do you think? Buy, sell, hoard?
Well, right now, actually, you just asked me. We just got a buy on. I trade using a mathematical algorithm. Excuse me. And over the past hour, we just got a buy on the 60-minute chart. So if we were to close above 11.13, let's say for a round number, we would be long on an hourly chart, which is a good sign for the short term. But if we look at a long-term chart, which I have here in the background, we've been long since October 2015 at 270. So with all the noise that's happened, we actually haven't gotten out of the trade since October 2015. On the website, since I just had it published, starting this year, I just started a new buy at 898.22. Half the position is still on the table. We're up 12.27% for the year. And the other half is still live at 11.09 now on Coinbase. So I provide that for free on the website. Anybody has questions, they can contact me there as well.
Excellent. Sounds really great. Well, thanks very much, Mark, for joining us today, teaching us all about this. Folks, you can look for Mark online. Hey, do you want to help me come up? So we have, we broadcast on multiple networks, and one of them is Let's Talk Bitcoin. And so for people who are listening at LTB, they like a magic word, a magic phrase. Do you want to help me come up with one? Go. It can't be like Mark is the best. That can't be the phrase.
No, let's just do smart money.
Smart money. All right, fine. All right. Bitcoin is smart money. That's the phrase. Word. All right, awesome. So thanks very much for joining me. Thanks again to all our sponsors, Bitcoin CPA, Crypto Compare, Third Key Solutions, NetKey, Sovereign Tech, Sex and Science Tower, Voltoro, Crypto Media Hub, my company that I never mentioned for some reason, providing consulting on PR events. We're doing a concierge, conference concierge service, which I think is kind of cool. And yeah, and March 31st, Tatiana album, Support Me. Go to TatianaCoin.com, buy your Tatiana coins, pre-purchase the album, tell your friends. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. We might have a special episode this week later on, but I'll keep you posted. Take care. Bye. Thanks, everyone. Peace out.